if you're watching a movie, they would say that family, it's family rated, right? And then when they put L, that is language, as violence there, so that people who are watching can be able to know whether to see that or not. I think that this presentation is rated P, provocative. So I just want to mention here that the purpose of this presentation really is to get you provoked. So if you feel provoked, you should know that we are actually, that's the purpose. And if you are not necessarily, that's not your goal, then maybe this is not for you. The outline of my presentation is as follows. The first thing is that I'll give an overview of the challenges of teaching in the 21st century students. And then I'll talk about the implications of international dashboard on emerging technologies. What is exactly do we see from the international dashboard there? I'll then define emerging technologies and why no one knows the definition. And I think that's the kind of, so I'll define it and I'll also tell you just why no one knows the definition. I'll then talk about the institutional provided technologies versus the student-owned technologies. There is a dichotomy there. I'll talk about that. And then I'll talk about the connectedness and the connectivism. Connectedness and connectivism, and why it does not make sense to remain in your own lane in a very unconnected way. That used to work, but it can't work anymore. So I'll talk about that, why we are all connected, and why that connectedness has a very huge impact on where the future is going and where the future is. I'll then report on the South African survey that we did on emerging technologies and what kind of thing is coming through as emerging technologies from there. And then I should be able to make recommendations from based on what I'll be able to talk about and conclude. That's the kind of outline of the presentation. The first part of it is that 21st century students, they actually look like that. And oftentimes we see them. We see these students, some of them, they live with us in our homes, and we see students who look like that. Have you ever seen a student who look like that? Okay. They look like that, and they are very serious when they look like that. They want to be able to have the TVs going on, they're watching sports, and then they've got some earplug listening to some music, they've got a computer open there, they've got some books open, the phone mic ring, they've got a lot of things going at the same time. That's the kind of students that we see. And oftentimes it irritates us, right? We get irritated. Can you switch these things off and start studying or something like that? Because we never studied like that. Because for us to actually study, everything must be quiet. Switch off everything. But these are today's students. The other thing is that we have been teaching in this kind of mode of delivery. I want to be able to tell you that that mode of delivery is the 19th century pedagogy. In the 19th century, that photo was taken in the 19th century lecture hall. The lecturer was standing up there. The lecturer was standing up there. I don't know whether you want to see that. You see. Yeah. The lecturer is up there. These are the students in the 19th century. And the lecture was being delivered. 21st century, we still see lecture halls that look like this. Any difference? Is there any difference? Yeah. This is 21st century photo. It was just was taken this year. Look at how far we've moved and how far we have not moved. What is the main focus when we teach like that? The purpose of the assembly is teaching. That is the reason why people go to the lecture hall. Learning is a subsidiary outcome. We just hope it happens. The goal is to teach. Learning, we hope it will take place. I mean, how would you know, when you stand here, how would you know what kind of learning is happening here? Or if it happens at all? We have never moved this much from the 19th century. And a lot of other people that have actually looked at this, they do say that this kind of mode of delivery was outdated in the 20th century. But we've sustained it. There's nothing wrong with that. From the economical point of view, it's much easier to have one lecturer here and 600 students. It's a good economic model. You tell me, what kind of contact education is happening here? Students are in contact education. Is there any contact? My answer is no. There is no contact. When we begin learning, learning happens when students go to the lab, learning through doing and reflection. It's actually when they've actually gone to do things. That's when they begin to engage and to learn. It's actually when students begin to do what is called peer learning. When they talk and discuss and share these kind of ideas, that's where learning takes place. I'm sure you know that you learn a lot when you do that than when you're sitting there and listening to a lecture. In fact, they do say that lecture, that mode of delivery, is one way of getting content from the educator to the notebooks of students without passing through the heads. Learning through fieldwork. That's where learning happens, when students begin to engage in an authentic context. In all these, one of the things we see is that when we focus on these students being the core, then what you want to do is that students collaborate and they find and solve problems, they develop skills. If that's what should happen, then we need to be able to develop learning activities that could be interdisciplinary or problem-based or in context and then computer-based and such like. But we'll be able to revisit this. We'll be able to see just how the use of emerging technologies comes in this. One of the things we see here is that 21st century education involves something like this: today's teachers, yesterday's learners. Now, today's teachers are yesterday's learners. Okay. And we have seen this over and over, how that many educators tend to teach the way they were taught. You see, you tend to approach your teaching similar to the way you were taught. So today's educators are yesterday's learners. What happens here is that we have what we call digital immigrants. Slow-paced learning styles, less comfortable with technology, cooperative teaching and learning processes needed there, but then we are dealing with digital natives being taught by digital immigrants mainly. We then have most of those students born into a technologically rich world. And today's learners are tomorrow's teachers. And that's where there's hope. And I see hope. Today's learners are tomorrow's teachers. I see lots of hope. Can you imagine just how education is going to look like when today's students, if they are taught properly in the 21st century, where they should become effective teachers for the 21st century? And I'll be able to visit this and talk about this. What about today's educator? What we need is an educator who looks like this, very armed with web access, building a new paradigm, skill sets of the 21st century, and then with different kinds of learning, thinking pedagogy, information management, and creative. And this is the kind of being armed we're talking about. Not just being armed with disciplinary content knowledge. You must be armed in a much more broadly based way if we are going to respond to the needs of the 21st century students and prepare them for the 21st century workplace. The question really is, how much can we go in arming the digital immigrant educators? I mean, how much can you go in doing that? And I'm sure that's the challenge. It's not a unique challenge to Makerere, but it is a challenge. When we look at the indicators from the international dashboard, as I call it here, in the outlook, in the technology outlook of the UK tertiary education, they actually predict that within 1 year or less, cloud computing, mobiles, open content, and tablet computing is going to be the main thing to become dominant. And that in this report here, which is the Horizon report for 2011, they talk about cloud computing, collaborative environments, electronic books, and mobiles. They actually predict that that is going to become dominant. The other thing we see in the 2010 Horizon report from the Australia and New Zealand edition, they talk about cloud computing, they talk about electronic books, mobiles, and social networking becoming very in thing in the next 1 year or so. Then they predict what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. They talk about all these different technologies as going to become increasingly dominant in the next 2 to 3 years. And in the next 4 to 5 years, these technologies here are going to become very dominant. Now, we can be able to say, well, these are international, that's the international dashboard. That's why I call it an international dashboard. Because it gives us indications on where things are. We are talking about education. These are Horizon reports. It's about trying to really look at what is going on in education sector from 3 different international reports covering different things, all of them predicting very similar kind of things. The question is, what are we, I mean, what's our dashboard reading like? I mean, do you even look at the dashboard? I mean, what's your dashboard saying? Where is education going? What is becoming dominant? What are you observing amongst your students? And about what are you observing? Are you observing at all? You see, that becomes quite important. The promise of emerging technologies. Now, Johnson, in their work, which was published last year, they actually talk about the use of emerging technologies such as Facebook, Twitter, blogs, and many others among students and educators is increasing. That's in their work. They actually observe and they report and they publish like that. That there is an increase in the use of these tools, these technologies, which they classify as emerging, Facebook, Twitter, and blogs. Johnson also says, they say that the use of technologies promise to radically transform teaching and learning practice. So the use is there, and then they do promise to radically transform. But I'll tell you why that kind of promise is just a promise. Because this transformation cannot happen when educators are not playing a role. You see, you can't transform teaching with anything unless educators are playing a role to actually do that. What we will see in my presentation is the fact that a number of students are using these emerging technologies. And educators are using technologies that emerged 10 years ago, and they regard them as latest. Or they regard them as that. You see, the technologies that are emerging amongst educators and the technologies that are emerging among students, educators are not catching up. They are far behind. When educators say, oh, I found some technology, I want to introduce it to students, students have already gone past. There's nothing fun or exciting about the technology. That's how slow higher education is to adopt to anything. Somebody said, moving a university is like moving a cemetery. The inhabitants don't help you. Now, when we talk about the terminologies, emerging technologies is a very contested term. It has contested meaning. Just to be able to respond to it. Okay? Because we actually see that Siemens and Tenneberger and Valenciano, they mention these that as if it is a universally accepted meaning. It's not universally accepted. Emerging technologies. It is contested, and understandably so, because if it was that easy to define, I mean, what is emerging? Immediately you understand what is emerging, then it has emerged. Yes? I mean, so that's the problem. It's the problem with the term as well as the problem in the definition. So we can be able to, when you look at the attempts that have been done, the New Media Consortium of Horizon Reports, similar to the book, 2009, and also they look at Valenciano's edited collection of emerging technologies published in 2010. We can be able to see when you read all that the definition is still in flux. You can read all of that. You see the definition. I mean, I've read that to look for the definition. As you can see, I'm interested in the definition. Now, where does this leave us? Does it mean that there are no technologies emerging? There are technologies emerging. The fact that we can't define the term does not take away from the fact that technologies are emerging. When we look at those three reports, the New Media Consortium states that emerging technologies are those that are likely to have a large impact on teaching and learning or creative expression within higher education. That's the way they define it. So for them, they see emerging technologies as those technologies that are likely to have a large impact. When we look at Siemens and Tenneberger, they look at emerging technologies as social software. Technologies that are not neutral, but they have multiple affordances. You know, you can do so many things with the same technology. It's not just one thing. You can't just do one thing with it. You can do so many other things with the same technology. For them, they define emerging technologies as qualifying in that. Valenciano says that emerging technologies are tools, they are concepts, they are innovations, they are advancements that are utilized in diverse educational settings to serve valid educational related purposes. For them, that's how Valenciano defines emerging technologies. We can see that when you put all these definitions together, emerging technologies becomes very difficult. Which one is it? I mean, which one? Now, for the purposes of this, rather than look for the definition, what we did was we opted to look for the characteristics. So we settled for the characteristics rather than the definition. And these characteristics can be used to explain, describe emerging technologies without defining it. You don't have to define it. But you can, when you see the characteristics, you can know that it is. I mean, if you don't define something, but you can describe its properties. When you see it, you know it. Yes. So we can say that emerging technology, in fact, Valenciano puts together these different characteristics there. Technologies that may or may not be new technologies. So they may or may not be new technologies. Evolving organisms, they exist in a state of coming into being. So they, otherwise they come into being, then they've emerged. So they are always in a state of coming into being. They go through hype cycles. I'll talk about that. They are not yet fully understood. Okay, they are understood, but not yet fully. Okay? Because they are emerging. Then they are not yet fully researched. Therein lies the researchers in higher education. They are not yet fully researched. Well, if you are going to conduct research, you don't want to conduct research on something that has been fully researched to overtrodden. This gives a good space for that. They are potentially disruptive, but that potential is mostly unfulfilled. Potentially disruptive. Now, when you talk about potentially disruptive, for those that see order as being running away from trying things, then you can't try emerging technologies. Potentially disruptive in a positive way. Anything that transforms is disruptive. You think about anything that changes anything. It is disruptive. But that does not mean that it's bad. We will have to disrupt the 19th century mode of delivery. We've got to disrupt them. Technology is disruptive. If you stay away because you are afraid of disruption, disruption will find you where you are. Okay. Because you can so very easily be swallowed by disruptions all over because you are so self-contained and secure. And then disruption, it's like a person who doesn't want to subject themselves to a tsunami, which is coming. Just there, peaceful as you are, to find you and sweep you over. That's the kind of disruption. We've got to respond to that. Is higher education passive or active in terms of responding to this? What we see is that there's an increased gap between educators with resources and with the will to experiment and those who can't and those who are not willing to. I mean, that's mouthful, but you can understand the meaning. Students are increasingly being disengaged. And if increasingly feeling disengaged, you must be able to see somebody who is very technologically connected. And then you bring them in a class to sit there, and then you say, switch off your cell phones, leave the phones out there, nothing should happen. And then they feel very disengaged. Mismatch between student expectations of higher education. Students out there, they've got expectations of higher education. And they come for the higher education and say, oh, this is it. I would be much rather been out there. Opportunities for preparing 21st century graduates are being lost. That is the reason why most of our graduates, they go out there in industry, they're actually having a cultural shock because industry is able to catch on quickly with these technologies that we are preparing students for the same industry where the students are going. Student skills are not visibly accessible. Students know a lot than we assess them, actually. The question is, how do we really get to understand to a point whereby we are very fair in the way we assess? The mission of higher education tends to be failing students. The hype cycle for education 2010 looks like this. Is anyone not familiar with hype cycle? Do you know the hype cycle? Do you know the hype cycle?
No.
No. Okay, I'll quickly mention what the hype cycle is. The hype cycle has these stages here. Any new innovation or any new technology, according to the Gartner hype cycle, so it climbs up there because it's just new and everyone is excited about it. Then it reaches a peak here, which is called a peak of inflated expectations. That point here, people begin to realize that the technology is not what it promised to deliver. So they get a bit disappointed. So here, they were very excited. Here, they then realized that, oh, no, I mean, it's not. And then it goes through what is called a trough of disillusionment. Down here, it comes down here. Some technologies just die away because they can't survive this slope here. You know, it's like you've been going uphill and then you come down, some technologies don't survive there. Then they go through what is called a slope of enlightenment, where now people begin saying, look, this technology is not, we had too much expectation. Let's be realistic. It's a good technology. If we use it properly and we think well about it, I mean, we just appropriate it accordingly, we can actually make use of it. And then so the slope of enlightenment is where technology has actually gone through that, and then they are at the point where people are now using them because they know that this is a well-tested technology and that it has, you know, we can be able to adopt it and use it properly. And then it goes through what is called a plateau of productivity, where at this point, everyone is just using it productively. Any technology goes through that. When we look at this, we actually see lots of technologies which have actually survived here. You know, like the web and application hosting, the blogs, we see grid computing here, the cloud email. The cloud email, I should talk about that briefly because it has a lot of impact on a lot of other things. In the past, institutions would have their own email server so that they can control email, right? And then be responsible for managing everything. And then there came cloud email, like Gmail, as an example. Everyone has a Gmail account, at least most of them. The ones who don't have Gmail account, they've got Yahoo account. Do you know where the Gmail server is? No. Do you know where your emails sit? No. No. You have no idea. Does it matter to you? You see, that is what's about. That's what cloud email is about. I really don't care where Gmail server and everything else sits. All I care about is that my Gmail account is working. I must log in, I must see my email. I know, you know, that's cloud email. And there are lots of cloud technologies like that, where you have lots of stuff that you are working on. It's just sitting somewhere where in the past you needed to have the server and the host, where you actually know that I can go to this person, he's actually hosting my services and what's going on with my services. Cloud computing actually takes care of that, takes away that responsibility from you. And there are lots of tools, the same as Facebook. Do you really know when you post something in Facebook where it goes? Do you know? Do you really know where Facebook servers sit? And no one cares. Okay. And you should not care. Now, that is important because there is what we call, when I talk about learning management systems, you'll be able to see learning management systems which are cloud hosted as well. Okay, cloud hosted. Most personal learning systems which are cloud hosted. That's how the cloud computing comes in. Everything in the cloud. In the cloud somewhere. Okay. There are two ways of responding to this. One way would be something like, well, we can do learning objects camp, there's learning object camp, and then there's learning communities camp. But I'll unpack some of these in a different way. One, we could be able to say, let's design to remove humans from the loop. Okay. Let's do that. Let's design so that things are, you know, they are so nicely packed and intelligent enough that human beings are not involved. That's one. The other is learning communities camp, which actually means let's design to bring humans into the loop. The two camps, depending on which one you accept, it's going to take you in a different direction, in a different pathway, because you'll be able to do things differently. I mean, I would be able to say, look, if as an educator, I can be able to say, well, let me automate my lectures so that the human is removed. Or I can be able to say, let me create learning spaces where students learn from each other, and then I guide them and I provide input. The two are different. The other thing is that when you look at the two, this is the learning object camp, where they say it's an independent learning object there, the content, the instructional strategies, and everything, we put them together. And then we just put that, take that whole black box to a student. So, you know, think of that as something that we give students. And they can be all by themselves because everything is sort of packaged. You can just open this small sack and you'll find content. Yes. Yes. And you find instructions here. Look, and then they can go outside the box through this box. The other is the learning communities. Here, the classroom learning community is about sharing and collaborating. It's about reflecting and articulating. It's about connecting and creating. It's about listening and responding. That's what learning community is about. So, and if we are to go either way, if you want to go the learning objects way or the learning communities way, you position yourself in two different pathways. This one here requires that one revisits, you restructure, you recreate, you repurpose, you redo something in terms of the pedagogy. But that is more effective. Did you talk about the 21st century skills? I'm sure you have engaged with this. What we see with the 21st century skills, many people, when they talk about 21st century skills, they think that we're saying that students should not learn the core curriculum. That is not correct. You still have the core subject here. You still learn this. But then there's life and career skills. There's learning and innovation skills. There's information, media, and technology skills. There's a lot of other things that you need to be able to take into account. You bring them all, not just being able to focus on the core curriculum, because I mean it is important, but then that's not all, because the human world, the human problems are much more broader than simply being limited to a single kind of discipline. There's no one discipline that can solve all the human problems. Now, with all these kind of complexity, we then begin talking about the blended, mixed approaches to increase, the blended and mixed approaches. So you want to be able to have the traditional modes and then have the blended with the different kinds of approaches. I thought this was of interest because this university here, they were advertising their own distance program, and then they said that a place where people connect. And I tried to look and say, connect with what? And I couldn't find connect what? Connect with what? I don't want just to be connected with. I want to be connected with something. Would you go? Would you go?
Maybe.
If somebody says, come, you get connected, would you go? You wouldn't go. You said you wouldn't go. talk about all this, there is a trend right now called massive open online courses. The MOOC. You know about it? It's an interesting kind of approach here, because what they're saying is that in the massive open online courses, there are courses that you don't have to, they don't come from one place, okay? But they are available online. You don't pay for them. You only pay if you want accreditation. But just to do them, you don't have to. There is a lot of material there, and there is a drive because of the kind of nature of the design that becomes quite interesting to look at. When you look at the kind of institutions, the kind of imaged ICTs that are provided at institutions are things like this. Learning management systems like Sakai, Moodle, WebCT, Blackboard, which is part of Sakai we use at UCT. Email. Most institutions now provide email. I mean, they have always done it because they think that email is innovative. SMS. When SMS came, most institutions never wanted to touch SMS. See? When SMS just began, many institutions, they never wanted SMS. Okay. Now, students have moved away from SMS. Now we want SMS. Do you understand? Okay. Now we want. Now we want to use them. That's why they're there. That is what institutions are now providing. Students don't even read SMS. I can send an SMS. Because students are here. This is what students are using. We are busy providing what students have left.
Use the future.
Sorry. And we are embracing that as the thing. I mean, that worries me. I hope it does worry you. Because 10 years today, educators are going to be wanting to use this. Because they'll say, yes, now let's map out a strategy, to actually incorporate all this. And the students would have left. And that's a problem. It's a big problem. It's a huge problem. And I really think that whatever happens, we must find a way of bridging this and bridging it very quickly. Okay? Otherwise, we can as well forget. The history of learning management systems. I don't know whether you know that the first machine here, the device that resembles a typewriter with a window that could administer multiple choice questions, was first designed in 1924. Did you know that?
No.
See, 1924, that's when they designed the first learning management system. That's a long time ago. It's about 80 years or something. Then we see in 1983 when MIT announced what they called Project Athena. And then this then led to a number of other projects mushrooming in that kind of way. And then in 1990, I've actually left out quite a number of other stuff in the timeline. And then in 1990 there we see a launch of what we call the first learning management system, first class. And then in 1997, that's when there was this other learning management system, which was an interactive learning network. This was the first e-learning system of its kind to leverage the relational, for those that are in computers, the relational database, the MySQL, here. And then in 2002, that is when Moodle, open source, internal network, the name Moodle was actually first released in 2002. Yes? Which is being embraced now, of course. But in Yes. So, I mean, you understand my point. In 2012, look at the difference. How many years?
10.
Sorry?
10.
Yeah. So, again, 10 years today, then we'll get those student stuff. Which, no. But anyway, don't worry about that. But my point here is this. In 2012 today, most modern learning management systems are hosted in the cloud. Remember? They are hosted in the cloud. That's where the trend is. At UCT, we don't host it in the cloud. We host it. We host it ourselves. Yeah. I am actually saying, I'm sure you're not reading into this to suggest that UCT is any better. But I'm actually saying to you that look, as educators, this dichotomy should be worrisome. What version of education are you? Let me explain this. Education 1.0. That's the traditional education. The one that I talked about earlier. That's pedagogy. That's where you stand in front and you teach. And that's it. That's education 1.1. Education 2.0 is where the internet is a place to go for instant access to information. So if you want information, go there to the internet. Go to the internet. So it's a place to go. Now, that's education 2.0. I put this one here so that you can see that education 2.0 does not mean that you throw away education 1.0. You can come with it, but then that's education 2.0. In education 3.0, you interact with the web and other online users. Okay? So you interact with the web and you interact with other people whom you don't have to know. You don't have to, but they're online users. Some of them you know them personally, but you don't have to really know them personally, But that's education 3.0. What about education 4.0? That's where the world is. That's where we are. The education 4.0, authentic human connections and collaborations. Authentic human connections. You're actually saying, when you are teaching students that are involved in a scientific kind of thing, you get them to begin to engage with people out there who are doing the real thing. Okay? So there's that kind of engagement. That's the authentic kind of thing. So authentic human collaborations, where I want students, I'll give my students a task where they write a paper, but then they are responding to a real call for papers. They are responding to a real call, not just you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
No, yeah. So that's what I mean. You're actually engaging with real people, real editors, real reviewers, real people, but then that kind of task. I was quite intrigued when I saw this, because this one here was actually an advert. This was an advert which says, not all questions can be answered by Google. You are warmly invited to our Sunday worship at 9 o'clock to 10 a.m. at 7 p.m. Not all life questions can be answered by Google. Yes? It actually good advert. It captures it. Because it actually shows that we are a human being is connected, complex. You understand? Yeah. Lots of connected traits. That's the kind of connection. They used to say that the world was a small world. It's a small world. Technology has even made it smaller. Okay? When they say it's a small world, they were actually meaning that you meet somebody here and then you just go and you bounce into them again, and then something like that. I think that's what they meant. That you can't completely be away from people forever. You know, so that's a small world. You're actually talking in terms of a physical understanding. Is that right? We are like this. The world is that kind of connected. And I'll show you just what that means. Today, there is a concept of crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is simply, if I want to know something, I can just go on the internet and I can ask, does anyone know how to do this and this and this? I'm not even asking any human being. You know what I mean? I'm not asking any human person. I know I'm asking people, but I'm not asking anyone. I'm asking the crowd. And believe you me, people come back with answers, suggestions, and they're going to help you, you know? And that's what happens. And that is quite intriguing, because what you will see, we can solve problems. All these people, they are there that they can solve problems. They can help solve a problem. And that you don't even know them. I mean, if you think about it, the implications of this is that there is almost hardly a question that you can ask students to do, which they can't just ask the world. They can just ask all these people. You know, I mean, what question can you have? What question? Which question? Any question that you can ever imagine. You know, it's because this is a photo. That's why I can't show you infinity. You know, it's the whole thing. Billions of people in the world. You can just ask them, and they will help you. I see that is and huge implications there. But that is where the world is. It actually begins to challenge our whole notion of one-on-one education. You see, one-on-one education. You think that if you are giving a student an assignment now, like at the end of today's class, I give them an assignment and they bring the answer tomorrow, you really think that they did it that themselves would ask the world? I mean, you really think? Huge implications. Whenever I've not known how to do something, I go to YouTube. Because on YouTube, there are so many people that have done something and just want to share with the world. You see, they just want to share with the world. There is hardly anything that you want to know how to do, which is not available, the answer, on YouTube. You watch a video of somebody explaining it. The purpose of this is this. Unlike you, most young people who are our students are living in a world where they are not afraid to share with the world. You see, they are not afraid to communicate with the world out there. They just put their ideas and thoughts and everything out there. For you, you think twice, maybe 3 times, 4 times, many times before you can do that. And then you talk yourself out and you don't do it. For them, the engagement, you see, this is how young people, today's young people, this is it. When I'm talking to you, Paul, I can have conversation with you, and I want the world to hear. See, but we are talking, 2 of us. This is what the young people are. Huge implications in terms of how do we really You see, the four walls of the classroom are no longer there. You can't limit learning to only the four confines of the room. And most of the resources, I don't know where you draw your resources from, but on YouTube, there are 48 hours of video posted almost every minute. In fact, says of video uploaded every minute. So, 40, do you know how much that is? 48 hours of video posted. Small segments of video, total 48 hours of watching. Yeah, in other words, people are engaging, they are actually providing and they are using YouTube as a space where they are providing and sharing resources. The implications of this is that you as an educator, and I should mention that there is a lot of useful educational resources on YouTube, like Khan Academy, as an example. Khan Academy, there is mathematics, science of any kind, chemistry, physics, you find it there. Good explanations, good examples, useful stuff. What I've just been doing now is that one of my PhD students has just written an application which looks at the educational content from YouTube, which is tagged with UCT, and harvests that and plays it on mobile ones. Because many institutions of eLearning are using YouTube to record their lectures and publish them via YouTube. In other words, use YouTube as a channel of delivery. My question to you, do you know where YouTube servers sit? Do you know?
No.
Do you care? You see, you care. That's my question to you. The connected world. Twitter. That's about Twitter. You follow me, and I follow you, or I don't follow you, I follow somebody else, you follow somebody else, who follows somebody else, and then they all follow everyone else, and this one follows this one. The kind of loose connections in the world are very few. Because if I follow you, and then you follow somebody, who follows somebody, who follows somebody, who follows, by the end, when we piece all that, we are almost connected. The kind of loose connections here are very, very few. And that's the kind of connectedness. Is that right? Now, this is actually enabling, has actually facilitated. This is why social networking has become so successful. Because we're a connected world. All these, not just Facebook, all these social networking tools, some of which you've never seen, and you don't even need to know them, but they are all there, social networking, trying to connect the world and make sure that people are connected and they're talking to each other and so on. That's where the world is. I'll soon explain why I need to spend time to talk about this. Because this changes the role of educators. It changes some of the roles of the educators. Because in the past, as an educator, you would spend time, you would provide this learning, this content. Educator, student. Yes? Educator, student. You would worry about, the student here can find their own, they are learning their own things, they are finding their own sources, their own content, their own everything else. You are also finding, you also have a lot of things, some of which you are creating yourself. And this is the one that is created by the educator. See that? And also shared with the student. And student has access to all of these others. And you also have a lot of access. It's, there's just too much. The question is, what do you have to do? What is your role? Okay. Now, this then brings us to a theory of connectivism. Because we ought to understand connectivism. The theory of connectivism helps us to understand or to begin to piece together how learning is being shaped by the connectedness. You see, how is learning how is student learning being changed and shaped through this connectedness? Because once we understand this, we can almost begin to understand how you as an educator, you are going to teach students who are connected. And it begins to have a lot of other impact. Because learning, according to this theory of connectivity, learning is a process of connecting specialized nodes or information sources. Specialized nodes could be people, could be info, could be anything, could be those kind of learning or any connections. Now, the capacity to know more is more critical than what is currently known. And that's where the challenge is. What you know what you know? What you know is not as important or as critical as your capacity to know more. You see, if what you know is it, and you are closed because you think that you are full, because you have learned and you know, before you realize, your knowledge level will be emptying and dropping to nothing. The capacity to know more is more critical. The ability to see connections between fields, ideas, concepts is the core skill. Today, that is important. How do you see the connections? Because it's about connections. How do you see connections? How do you really evaluate very quickly the value of a connection? That, look, if I connect with him, connect with her, if I connect this idea and everything else, if I connect this idea with this idea and this idea, I'll get this idea. Okay? If I connect this and this, I can have this result. So connections. So the ability to be able to see the connections, to identify connections, to appreciate connections between ideas and everything else, that is a core skill. Because in a connected world, you don't just avail yourself to connectedness. Because you'll be lost. You'll be lost in this world of connectedness. The world is so complex. You can't just connect, and it's like you just dive in the stream, in the river now, which I saw the other day, and they can just take you anywhere where it wants. Well, I mean, you ought to be able to identify it. The other thing is that facilitating continual learning. That's the role of the educator. Facilitating continual learning is a process of nurturing and maintaining connections. So how do you nurture, how do you teach nurturing and facilitation of connections with ideas? I need to be able to know what is the connection between humanities, social science, and physical science. I mean, this idea, what is the connection between these things? It's going to be that broad. It's different from simply saying, that's not my area. I don't want to look at it. It's not the same as being able to say, look, how does this connect with? Can you just explain? I mean, you want to be able to say it. Theory of connectivity. Most of these authors, Weige, Valenciano, they talk about connectivism is more a theory of curriculum specifying what the goal of education should be and the way students should learn in that curriculum. It's not as such a theory of learning, but a theory of, we can be able to say that one which specifies the goals of education, the goals as the learning outcomes, and how students can be able to learn in that curriculum through the nurturing of those kind of connections. Learning is therefore a creation and removal of connections. Removal of connections is learning. You don't just connect. Sometimes you disconnect. You disconnect. You disconnect. It's part of learning. The disconnect is part of learning. I'm telling you that with me that learning when to disconnect is part of learning. It's important. So Now, so it's between the entities and the kind of adjustments of the strengths of those connections. So in learning theory, we can be able to describe how these connections are created and adjusted. How do we get these connections like that? So if we say that learning is a connection-making process, how is that? If you are teaching, whatever you teach, and we define is a connection-making process. So in today's lecture, I want you to tell me how what we talked about connects with what we talked about last time. How do these ideas connect? It's a connection-making process. Otherwise, it doesn't fit in. And if I can know that this thing is not part and parcel of it, it's not part of the network, then I know something. I'll soon talk about these emerging technologies and how we use them and that. Anderson, in 2008, talks about connectivism as one which helps people to understand that learning is about making connections with ideas. And then Makerere goes on to say there that behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and learner-centered approaches, they are learner-driven, and connectivism is not necessarily in conflict with this, because you can still be able to have these ones within connectivism. It's learner-driven. What we did was that we were interested in understanding, that is in South Africa, in understanding the relationship between the way educators think and use emerging technologies, and that's relationship between use and transformation of learning, or its impact on the teaching and learning practice. So this is part of the National Research Foundation project, and so what we did was that we targeted lecturers that were known to be open to or engage with technology. Now, so we did not want to just survey all the lecturers, because that was going to be pointless. It's a pointless exercise. So it's like we would come to, the way we did it, we'd come to a university like Makerere, we'll then go to the e-learning unit, and then the e-learning unit will help us to identify, or the satellite to help us to identify people at the institution who were using technologies, or some in one form or the other. That's how we conducted it. So what we did with that was that we adopted some kind of a conceptual framework. We pieced together a conceptual framework which was based on the work of Mayers and De Freitas, who talked about the kind of three perspectives that inform the choice of learning strategies or teaching strategies. In their work, they say associative is task-focused, and cognitive is to develop autonomous learners, and then situative exploits learning relationships, connectedness. So that's what we wanted to explore. So we adopted that, and then we pieced that together with the learning strategies, which we actually saw from literature that there is what is referred to as prescriptive learning, which predetermines what learners should learn, which Williams talks about, that prescriptive learning, where you assume that students don't know what they should know. So we should decide in advance for them what they should learn. And then they come in, we don't even talk to them, we just give it to them. Day 1, day 2, day 3, and then we examine them. We no engagement, whether what we pre-decided. No, there's no agreement. Do you have agreements here with students before? It's quite a chore. Yeah. Then there is the emergent transformative learning, which is learning through interactions with people, resources, and others. And then technology is used to increase the level of interaction. In fact, what we did was that, according to Anderson, the deep and meaningful learning happens when the level of interaction is high on any node. Either the level of interaction is high with in the interaction at any point, either with the teacher or with the student or student content. Any level of that interaction, if it's high, then it leads to deep and meaningful learning. And so we looked at emergent transformative. We put together an analytical framework which looked like this. So the associative, and then the cognitive, and the situative, and then the prescriptive or replicative, the predetermined one, and then the emergent transformative. So then we looked at associative, prescriptive, and then associative, emergent. And then we looked at cognitive, prescriptive, and cognitive, emergent. Making sense? All we did was a table of two. We wanted to actually understand. The study, these results were before we completed the study. So I actually pieced these results were before we had the study was completed. But we had this kind of data coming through. Most of the kind of, for those that may not understand the way South Africa is structured in terms of the different provinces, these institutions here, that is where the project members belonged. In other words, we were on the Western Cape, and these institutions are in the Western Cape. And a number of people that completed the study were from the Western Cape. But overall, there were a lot of other people from different institutions. We then had respondents divided like that, 56% of them being female. Then we saw, we classified the level of appointments as being that. At the moment, what is important is to begin looking at how we began to analyze what we saw. We saw things like this: prescriptive as being distributing routine lectures as things like podcasts or podcasts. Now, distribution of routine lectures simply meant that as you deliver a lecture in a traditional way, you record the lecture and then you distribute the lecture. You actually, because of the thing, podcast, simply the distribution of audio via the internet or distribution of video via the internet, which is the podcast. So we did that, which was replicative because all we are doing is replicating the face-to-face. You are simply not adding, you are not adding anything new, but you are extending the limitations of the classroom. You are facilitating an engagement with the lecture post the lecture. The value, you are increasing value. You are actually increasing value. But then you are towing the line of prescriptive. No, because you are actually just distributing the same lecture. What we did there was a lecture-generated podcast that we listened to by students there. And then here we also see the lecture being watched. We also saw the different, this one here, I pulled that from what we're trying to do, what we did at UCT there, where we had what you call notices on demand, the use of virtual notice board there, where instead of getting students to come physically to a notice board to read an announcement, they would put the announcement on a virtual space, and the students would then call the notice board. So the notice board would have a number. Okay? So they would call the notice board and to read the notices on the notice board. That's the notices on demand. Now, of course, not exactly a physical notice board. So we created a virtual space. Now, that again was prescriptive because it was not adding anything different from the normal announcements, but that we're just making it much easier to access them. Then we also saw situative emergent transformation. where students created their own podcasts. So students worked in a group, and then they created learning, they responded to a task to create podcasts, and they uploaded that onto the learning management system, which was Sakai in this case, which I just put Moodle there for the sake of clarity. So what we saw was students work collaboratively, that is situated there, to produce podcasts or broadcasts and then distribute that via the internet. Associative replication, what we saw was that it's more of the use of collaborative tools like NIG, where students within the class, at the end of the class, the lecturer then says that, look, you go to me and then have this kind of discussion. So you have the traditional class, but you as a lecturer, you give the lead to where students should go. So you are actually foregrounding a use of a tool. So then that becomes quite useful, because then students know that the lecturer will be able to expect to read what is being posted there, or such like, or the following day you can, or the next class, you then can be able to engage how the experience was. So that's a link between the face-to-face, the traditional way of teaching, and this you are including the use of some of these technologies. The emergent transformative example, I had to put this one here so that I'm going to read that. I ran an adaptive management course where students were given a fish in a tank to take for, or to take care for, or to care for, and to keep a personal blog journal of how often they changed its water, feed the fish, what plants they introduced, what was the quality of the water, and where they kept the fish. Now, this one here, as an adaptive management course, this was a very appropriate use of the course. Because what the nature of the task was that, look, you might wonder, how can I use a fish tank? No, that's not the point. The point is that this lecturer used an authentic fish, an authentic task, an authentic fish, and the maintenance and management of the fish in a tank. And the students just needed to blog their maintenance of this fish. That was quite useful in terms of the class using the tool to actually engage and share. The other example here of the situative replication was the students would then be paired up with those people in the community who have been trained by our local newspaper in basic print journalism. Students trained them in video storytelling, and then had to shoot their own clips. Now, what happened there was that students went to the community, and these are students of journalism. They went to the community, and then they trained some of the community members on how to be able to shoot a video, and then they participated to actually do that. Community involvement, but then very authentic in its nature and in articulation. You might not be able to read this from afar, but this one here does say that the types and uses of emerging technologies were with high level of interaction led to transformative uses. And then the use of emerging technologies with low to medium level of interactions led to replication or replicative uses. Replicative uses as being able to be able to achieve the same things that you normally do in a very traditional way, that you're using technologies. Not so much transformative. It's not changing much, but then if you want to change something, then you'll be able to increase or support higher levels of interaction. And what we also see here is that the different examples of transformative uses, like sharing student presentations online, student-generated podcast and broadcast, online assignments and submissions, and then gathering and sharing stories using mobile phones, and then asking and answering questions using microblogging, and then the replicative uses, both in terms of the online assignment. And we also saw that how that you can have the same task being used in a transformative way and also being used in a very mundane, descriptive way. The other thing that we also saw was the discipline-based uses of emerging technologies. Again, I know that you cannot read this, but we saw that uses of emerging technologies in business, in humanities, in the library, social science, natural science, and that the uses were not necessarily limited to a particular discipline, but that a number of educators from different disciplines, they found value in using the technologies. I'm getting closer to the end. One of the things that we have done at the University of Cape Town, particularly in the postgraduate program for which I'm responsible, we have used these different tools. Every year we use these tools. We use them in innovative ways to actually transform the teaching and learning practice. We have used Facebook, we've used Dingo. I should just talk about Dingo because we used Dingo last year and this year with quite useful results. What Dingo is that it helps, we ask students to read, to find certain kind of resources in their own home countries, which were articulations or discourse about ICTs or e-learning or such like. And then we wanted them to bookmark that, to have a shared bookmarking space. What Dingo does is that it helps students to go on the web, to find the resources, and then pull them together in a shared space. So what they're actually doing is that they are bookmarking. Students are working on their own, but then they are bookmarking stuff which is being put together in a shared space. That's what Dingo does. And that was quite interesting to see the effective use of Dingo. The SoundCloud, what SoundCloud does is that, you see, when I'm delivering this talk to you, I'm sure you, in your own minds, you are having conversation with me. Yes, you are asking questions, you're wondering about things, and so you are having some internal dialogue. Yeah, I mean, real people do that. Now, I know, so you are having internal dialogue. Now, with that internal dialogue, imagine what would happen if, as I talk, what you are thinking or what you are saying, which you are not, what you are saying inside, which you are not verbalizing. Imagine you are communicating. Then there will be some kind of, I'll be talking, and then you also be talking. Is that right? That's what will happen. So I'll be talking. I'll go on with my presentation, and then you are also talking. So there will be some kind of noise in the room. Now, what SoundCloud does is that it takes a recording like my recording and then puts it in SoundCloud and then invites students to listen to this delivery, and then they can comment as over the voice. They can now comment over the voice in text. And then at the end, I can actually have very similar to a class which was interrupting the lecturer all the time. But then it gives you a very good idea of the potential of emerging technology in this life. We've used Wikispaces, we've used Edimodo, we've used Wordle, we've used Dropbox, RSS, we've used Makerere, we've used Poll everywhere on the globe. What we've done as well is, I did mention briefly about this. What we have done recently has been to actually get the video of, say, a lecture, and then students can be able to watch that on their mobile, and other students can be able to comment on this lecture that way. And then they can also be able to just listen to a podcast in that kind of space, and then they can be able to make postings. One of the other tools that we found quite useful, unlike Dingo, this space here called Symbol, EDU, which is education, has been quite useful to create a space where all the different learning resources imagine you're creating a learning resource where you want, and most of the things have got different links and so on. You can create a learning resource in Simbaloo where you share that with the students. You share that with the students. This is say one course. And all these resources and all these ones, they can all be seen on one page. And the students can just be able to click there, they can get to the resources and they can come back to that space and so on. So that creates a very easy way of getting the resources in one space. One of the ways, the other ways apart from all these other things that I've talked about, we have been trying to blend the new with the old approaches. Now, if you look at a class like a very large class, what you really want to do is to provide some way of getting access to the thoughts of students or to the thoughts of your listeners. Because it's important that you have access to the thoughts. When one of the things that worries presenters is that when I'm talking, I don't know what you're thinking. But, you see, when you provide what we call a back channel is a space where you would have the whole of this audience. There will be an audience, and then they'll be using their mobile phones or different, mobile phones preferably. And then as the talk is going on, they are actually posting links to this space, which is being beamed, which is actually being beamed. Okay? So you have a class, and then people are talking, the lecture is going on, and then back channel is actually capturing the thoughts, questions, and everything else. And then what happens in many places where this kind of stuff has been used, you can be able to have somebody who is actually monitoring the back channel, who is not a student, of course, student assistant, who could then be able to read that and maybe occasionally, when the time interrupt the lecture and say, oh, there is a question about this and this, and then the lecturer can be able to respond to it. Back channel is an effective way of doing this. The other thing that we have done is to use different kinds of back channel as well, where as the class is going, I ask my students, now, that means that the lecturers themselves decided that they wanted to use emerging technology, self-motivated. It was evident from the data that most institutions provided neither incentive nor supportive environment to use emerging technologies for teaching. There was lack of policies in many of these instances and lack of incentive. That's what we saw. The other thing we began to, in conclusion, we can be able to say that technologies emerging amongst higher education educators in South Africa are those that are low bandwidth intensive technologies. We also saw the prevalence of learning management systems, which educators reported as being innovative. For them, it was emerging technology. So they were reporting that, oh, I'm using emerging technology. What are you using? Oh, learning management system. I'm using learning management system. And then for them, that is emerging technology. We saw lots of this in South Africa in the same. The motivating factors guiding educators' use of emerging technologies: passion and availability of technologies. Passion. The other conclusion is that emerging technologies' potential to transform teaching and learning practices, the spectrum of uses as per our framework. We actually began to say that the framework that we provided helped us to understand the types of use of emerging technologies and how those types of use began to shape the learning strategies. Though potential to transform teaching and learning practices exists, educators are not exploiting the opportunities. The potential is there. Educators are not exploiting the opportunities. If you look at this statement here, that educators are not exploiting the opportunities, it takes me back to where I started. because that is the purpose of us looking at emerging technologies. The potential remain unexploited. Further research, trying to look at whether we can be able to establish if there is any kind of link between awareness of technologies and use for teaching and learning. Can it be that educators don't use because they don't know? Is that the problem? Or can it be that they know and they don't use because they don't want to use? What is the problem? That is what we're trying to really establish. There are more details about this project on this blog, but I can be able to take questions, especially that I have managed to provoke someone.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much, Dick, for what you've shared with us today. It's been really a wealth of information. And what I see is that, yes, the emerging technologies have got a huge potential. And as Makerere University, we probably do have some challenges, as he shared with us. We are continuing maybe to teach using 19th century pedagogy. And we are teaching students who are digital natives. And they are 21st century students with the aspirations, expectations, skills that probably we are not matching up with. And I think I loved that question. What type of educator are you? Version 1.0 or 4.0? I think each one of us here you can place yourself where you want to be and take a decision as to where you want to go. And of course, he has shared with us this very exciting research that they have done at UCT. And I think it's done what you intended to provoke us. And I would like to invite us to ask a few questions. Maybe we'll take some two or three questions, and then you respond, and if there are others, then we'll take some more questions. So who would like to go first? Yes, please. And maybe for Dix, and for all of us, introduce yourself and then proceed to ask your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Masime Metanda. I come from Performing Arts and Film Department, School of Humanities and Social Sciences. It's a very informative and very provocative presentation that we have had this afternoon. And actually, as you talked, I could see some of my students really challenging me because we are in the class, we are trying to teach the traditional way, but somehow you see that their minds are somewhere else. And of course, I've also been really obsessed with the students who go to the internet as a source of information, but now I think I begin to see where it all comes from. Now, my question is, at your university, do you actually use the emerging technologies during examinations? Because in the teaching, I can say I can adapt. But then when it comes to assessment of the students and also examinations. Thank you.
Yes. Tena? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Makerere from Department of Adult and Community Education. One or two questions. One is about the context. I am a student of political economy, and one of the things that I read and try to internalize is the context. When you talk of the way you went through this very, very provocative presentation, but my mind kept asking me, is this possible in some of our countries, given the low levels of technological advancement, given the low levels of internet, is it bandwidth? You know, when you want to open a document and it takes ages and ages. But also given the socioeconomic background of our students. If you are going to put information on this Moodle and podcasting, some of these terms I actually don't know what they mean. But if you are going to put these on the computer, whatever, are our students capable of accessing and utilizing them? That is the first question about the context. The second one is these students generally that have come through this, what they call the .com era, you find, maybe it's because I am still a 1.0, but the English they use, which has been largely associated with texting, Facebooking, is not the English or the language that is expected of a scholar or an academic person, a person pursuing academic, scholarship. So there is that mismatch. And even when you are reading newspapers online in Uganda and you follow the readers' comments, some words are broken, others are abbreviated. So that tends then to impact on what they produce for me, who is the 1.0. Thank you very much.
Yes, just one more question. Let me take my deal first. Then Tito, you come in the next round.
Yeah, thanks. My name is George Benjuru. I think I've introduced myself already earlier. I was quite interested in when you were talking about connectivity, teaching about connection of ideas as the primary focus of teaching. And then I started thinking of what will happen to the curriculum, which is still content focused. How would the connectivity curriculum look like? I wanted you to.
Yes, maybe you can take those.
Yes. Fine. Let me start with the last question. I think the question is about what will happen to the curriculum. The curriculum does not change. It's the way the curriculum is delivered. It's the change of pedagogy. Most of the things that I'm talking about is about pedagogy. How do we ensure that students understand something and learn through interaction? So how do we get students, because any kind of content, one can be able to understand it. Because there are certain, I do understand the fact that there are certain kind of hard sciences, there are certain kind of things that you need to know before you can be able to begin to engage. So I understand that. Now what that means is that it's about pedagogy, it's about how do you construct learning activities. It's about learning design, not necessarily changing the curriculum. The aspect of context, I think, one, the reason why you don't understand the conversation that most of the young people use, because you are not the target audience. Because they are not targeting you. You are not the target audience. They are actually using text speak to talk to their colleagues, their peers, and they understand each other. And if you don't understand that, then they know. And in fact, there was a very interesting text speak, which was posted at some point, where they say inside the thing that they're actually talking about those who don't understand. Those who don't understand. So they are saying that if you don't understand this, you are not one of us. But they are saying that even within that, and then so you are not the audience. And what the impact of that for education is that just as much as we know that people can use vernacular to discuss a concept, physics concept, mathematics, people can be able to share in their own language, to share an understanding of something. It's very similar. You see, language is not static. Language evolves. Any language is never static. what we are seeing with the digital world is that there's this new form of language which has actually emerged, text lingo, that way SMS lingo. And I think it's important that we understand that, look, you can only remain in the education 1.1 for a time. You see, there is only a time, because you can't stay there. That's one point. The other point is that aspect of, would they be able to engage if you get to, in this context, the Ugandan context, can it facilitate this kind of thing that I've been talking about? The answer to that question is yes. What you need to do, just take a look at where your students are. Just know where your students are. Some of the things that students use, some of the students use to communicate with each other, learn from one another, stay connected with one another. You need to know what those are. Know what kind of technologies are emerging or have emerged amongst their people. And then see if you can be able to make the most of that. See, be comfortable enough to ask a student to teach you stuff. Come to a point where you are confident enough, and they will gladly take that opportunity. If you are not comfortable to do that outside the university. Learn outside the university on how to use some of these tools, because you can definitely acquire knowledge from out there and then bring it inside. So that's my other comment. Most students do have mobile phones, for example, and a number of students do have mobile phones which are even much smarter than what educators have. They are in this quest of ensuring that they stay up to date with the mobile phones. Maybe the pressure is even higher among them than the pressure which you have. So students do have these kind of mobile phones, and which can be able to do most of these things that you're talking about. The question really that you need to really face is, does it make sense to put in place infrastructure, put all these kind of technologies, wire them up, and expect students to come there? When they leave, they come to the space with their mobile phones in the pocket. They are engaging with their mobile phones on their way to the lab. And then they are leaving the computers, which they don't have at their own homes, but they carry with them the mobile phones. That should be able to begin to cause you to begin to wonder, can you be able to find ways of doing something with it? And I think that's what the question is. So the answer to that is yes, students do have means to actually engage with this. The first question was, do we at UCT use these technologies for examination? Good question. I said a few months ago, I put to Senate this question: does it make sense for this university, meaning University of Cape Town, never to receive any handwritten assignment from students during the year? Because we don't receive handwritten assignments from students. Does it make sense never to want students to submit any handwritten work and to expect them to use a pen for 3 hours to write an exam in the hall, when you have never taught them how to write an essay using a pen? Does it make sense? I put that question to Senate. It is logically questionable, and I do expect universities to be at a point where we can think these things. Logic doesn't really hold, doesn't come together if you think about it. So no, we don't use these tools in examination. However, I'm sure that's what you have here. There is continuous assessment, there's DP, and there's a certain kind of mark that's allocated for exams. You can be able to use that DP, those kind of marks that you accrue. You can be able to use that to actually incorporate most of the kind of assessment that uses technologies. You don't necessarily need to use these emerging technologies in the examination. We haven't gotten there yet. That said, you need to be able to ask yourselves, as far as I'm concerned, most of the work that we give students and how you can be able to do these things on your own and so on, and pass the exam and so on your own. The workplace for which we prepare students is about teamwork. You know, the workplace doesn't function the way we are actually thinking of students working. You know, there is a mismatch between what we are doing with students to work, you know, the way we are examining them and training them, and where they are going to go to work. Where in industry do students work alone? Where? I mean, there's no. Unless they are a solo business. Even in solo business, even if you own your own business, you don't work alone, do you? And that's the state of art. I mean, that's where things are. But I think that what we need to do is to question some of these traditions. I mean, some of these traditions are very, very questionable. You really need to question.
Thanks. I think I'd like just to, before we take on anything, what Mr. Karembe raised. I was a teacher of English for many years, and one of my greatest discomforts is with the quality of speech and writing that we have in university today, where someone submits an academic essay and they are using the text lingo to write an essay. I think the challenge is, how do we train learners to acquire the language that is required for official communication and for academic discourse, as opposed to bringing in the lingo into the academic discourse? Maybe you can pick that up as one of the next questions. Tito, you had your hand.
Yes. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's a good presentation, but I want to make a comment, especially on the last slide, just before that. Can you just go back? No, after that.
And research.
The research one.
The research one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the last
Oh, the last one. Okay, sure.
That why educators not exploit.
This one?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
No, there's something you said that why educators not exploit the use of educational technology. I captured something like that. Just, I think before that, I think you mentioned it without the slide. I think one of the challenges we have is that, one, there's a disconnect between the educators now and the students who are coming. Because the students who are coming are of different technological group. The educators are of a different technological group. So what happens is that because of this disconnect, the educators themselves don't want to unlearn what they have learned. As you said in your presentation, that you teach the way you were taught. So what is happening here, and that's what Mr. Karembe here was saying, that is it possible for this to happen, is because the tendency not to unlearn is very big among educators. Because technology is forcing us to unlearn what we learned, so that we relearn knowledge. And until we shift from the paradigm of no change to change, there's no way we are going to connect with the young generation. Because the people who are coming on board, tech savvy, they use all these things. Actually, by the time you are putting up your definition, they have checked on their mobile phone whether what you are saying is correct or not. My colleague here was actually checking what you are presenting. Yes, that's happening. He is of a different generation. So we need to be worrying about this. And as Makerere, I think we need to unlearn quite a lot of things so that we move away from you having the monopoly of education to the knowledge being out there. Because the chicken and the chick scenario was a very good representation of what happens. We don't have that monopoly anymore. Are we willing to go that road that you sit and wait? Yet the students are 10 years ahead of you. That's my comment.
Okay, thanks a lot for that comment. Maybe we'll take two more, and then I don't have dinner. I haven't had tea for you, and I haven't had dinner for you. I don't have dinner for you. So we'll take these two, and then we'll call it an evening.
Thank you. How do I say more from global business and writing science? I want to thank the presenter for such a wonderful paper, because for us in the college, and especially in statistics where I spend most of my time teaching, for us probably what is happening is the opposite of what you have described. Actually, we are being forced. We have to move where the students already are. Because, okay, they may come when they are not at the same level, but because of what we teach them, they actually come to a certain level where they become more or less innovative and, you know, they do things on their own. So a student can ask you, for example, why would you have done this on, you know, we have mobile phones with MP3 players or what, you know, why would you have done this? So I think really the biggest challenge now is for the university to put into place the institutional capacity for us to be able to accommodate, you know, some of these technologies. Because we definitely have to move the right direction. But then I was also looking at the process, because I take these ones as innovations, why I hope at it. And once they become innovations, then there are a number of questions which I may ask myself. For example, how did you create that culture, you know, that promotes these innovations? Because you said that most of these came up through self-motivation. And I would imagine that there must have been some starting point where, you know, which triggered off this sort of move in this direction. And once you have the innovations, then there is a process. You know, you must then decide on which innovations you think can actually work under your circumstance, I mean the situation that we are in, and then you implement. So I would definitely want to I would love to know how University of Cape Town has actually been able to do it. You imagine yourself in a setting like ours, and you want to move where you are. This process, how about you manage it? Unfortunately, the DPCA has moved away, because some of these things we have directed them to highlight. Do you see it? We need this for us to be able to move. So I would love to know how you actually start it. Because some of us are already, you know, being challenged by this. And probably, maybe a small thing, with the sciences, I don't know whether you noted some problems or more challenges with trying to adopt this, you know, using this imaging, you know, technologies. Where you see why should I know? In any case, at the end of the day, I have successful packages which I can use to solve these problems that we want. Yet at the same time, we must give them these methods. So I don't know whether you have come across, you know, particular challenges, maybe in the same way of the science.
Okay. I think the last question of the evening, Paul.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dick, for this provocative presentation. Thank you so much, members, also for the participation. Mine is not a question, but it's probably related to what Mr. Kalenge and what my former lecturer in statistics has just said about how do you get the university to get to where it is and the context. Now, I just want to give some examples of our own Makerere here. Yes, Professor has presented this provocative presentation, and us in the Department of Open and Distance Learning, actually, we have also sometimes been provoked, especially by reading his works and working with him and so on. And we have tried as individuals, because there he said passion is what drives taking up of them, some of these technologies and then showcasing them to the rest. So right now, within the context we are in, we've been able to do some things related with the use of mobile phones for learning, for example, for the distance learners. We've been able to extend or to port, say, collaborative learning on mobile phone using the text messaging systems, simple text messages. We've been able to broadcast out messages to students communicate administrative and academic work. Right now we're experimenting with the use of Facebook to engage students or to get students where they are in Facebook, because we found out that every time we went to the lab, we found students were busy on Facebook. So we wanted to find out how can we be able to engage them where they are. So myself and Mr. Mayende here, those who are teaching IT too, on BCom and BBA, in Jinja, in Poto, and then in Cobams, because this is the same curriculum, but having different lecturers and different students located differently. So we want to bring together these students. So we have experimented with Facebook, and we have found out that actually it's working for us, because the students in Poto can be able to meet the students in Jinja, to meet the students in Cobams, and they share a lot of things. They share questions, they share knowledge, whatever they have discovered on something, they share, they ask, and then we are there watching and trying to also come in here and once in a while. So within the context, as Professor said, it's able for us to be able to use what is available to us. And you'll be surprised to find that most of the communications that come in on the Facebook, you'll see that they will say sent from mobile phone or sent from BlackBerry or something like that. So most of the students actually, they have the mobile phones and they have Facebook on the mobile phone, and they're using it to learn IT too. So these are the small experimentations that we are trying to have within our context. So even within our context, therefore, we can be able to experiment and do a lot of these things. And for as long as, at the end of the day, for as long as then we can be able to influence the general community and the students can find the value in it, then we can be able to catch up. Thank you.
We've had some comments.
Just an addition. They're going to vet uses Facebook and international students for that reason. So there's a lot of criteria they have. So it is something which is going to be they use that
Right. I think the last contributions, the last three contributions have been comments. So there have not been questions, there have been comments, which I really appreciate those comments. I think there's only been one question there, as how did you do that? Right, that's the only question that I see. First and foremost, there's no magic. There's no magic here. The only way you can be able to do this, first and foremost, you must be able to have the will to explore new things. I think you must be able to have the will. You need to do that. See, being driven by passion, you must have the will to explore. You must be able to start not with the technology, but start with the learning. So focus, foreground, we always say that try and make technology invisible. In other words, you use technology, but make it invincible in the sense that you are not foregrounding it, you are foregrounding what you want to achieve as a learning task, as a task. You know, you want students to do what exactly you want students to do, and that's what you want to focus on. And from the institutional point of view, you need to be able to map out a strategy that allows you to work with people that are doing similar things, pull those kind of energies together, and then begin exploring that. I mean, because you do have Paul here, you have Tito, and you have yourself there, you've been exploring stuff, and there have been others, and others will be exploring different aspects. Pull that together so that you can have some kind of critical mass of people that are investigating innovative practices. So if you investigate innovative practices and then create spaces where you can just be able to come and have some kind of show and tell, so that you can be able to say, look, I've been teaching this, just like a round table, a show and tell, non-threatening, non-critical environment. I come here to share with my fellow educators what I've been doing in my course using a particular tool and what I'm learning from doing that. So if you have some of those non-threatening spaces, you'll be able to find that you will not only be encouraging yourself, but that other people are going to catch some of the fire that you are lighting. And so try and do more of that. It's about sharing. It's about ensuring that you become quite open to new ideas. Because you've got to be open to new ideas. And it should not matter where these new ideas are coming from, as long as they're new ideas openly. Look, it has been a privilege to have had this opportunity to make this presentation. And I'm so surprised that you're still seated there after such a long time. Thank you very much.
You can choose wherever you'd like to sit. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we've certainly been privileged to have Dr. Nick Ngauni to share with us. And he's taken us on a long journey from the 19th century pedagogy to the 21st century. And he's certainly posed a number of challenging questions which we ought to reflect upon as individuals. And I think ultimately the challenge, the goal is in our courts as Makerere University